If you think all towns are created equally, think again. There's big towns, small towns, and all sorts of towns in between. Texas towns, Florida towns, and Illinois too. Then there's the ghost towns, logging towns, coal towns, and ones with a view. Fun towns, desert towns, old towns, popular towns, forgotten towns, and those with nothing to do. Oh, how our beloved America has so many towns. But sightseers, someday you'll discover the best towns are really the ones that make you feel nostalgic, where you find yourself reminiscing about your grandma's apple pie or some old memories from childhood. Such is the vibe of the next town we present to you. One I think is highly underrated and should be added to the internet's list of best towns in Wisconsin.
Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. I'm in one of my absolute favorite small towns up here in Marinette County, known as Wasaki, and taking a little bit of a bike ride around town. Thought I'd show you around and share with you why I think this town is so underrated when it comes to best small towns to live and play in.
Welcome to Wasaki, a little town full of charm, located in the heart of Marinette County, only an hour's drive north of Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Not only is it a cool place to live and play in, there are some historic buildings here, which I thought I'd share with you those as well. So sit back and enjoy the ride virtually. Before we get started though, I'm going to show you their grocery store. Specifically, I'm looking at the name of it, Sal's Foods. Believe me, any town that's got a grocery store named after me. Just kidding. I'm sure Sal has been around a lot longer than I have, and if you didn't know, Sal is actually a name that they gave to boys back in the day. So it's quite likely that the original owner's name was Sal and he started the grocery store. Well, probably how many years later it's still called Sal's. Regardless, I just think it's really cool that they've got a grocery store here with a name I can relate to. I thought since there's so much traffic on Main Street that we would start up in a more quiet area. In the residential area, there is a couple of historic churches here in town, so I thought we'd head over there first and then get into some of the other things that make Wasaki such a really cool town to live in or even to visit. Looking back, you can see the railroad that comes through right along here. Historically, Wasaki was a logging town that sprang up, of course, right along the railroad, just like so many of the other towns up here in the North Woods.
Originally established as a hub for the logging industry, Wasaki became a rail stop along the Milwaukee and Northern Railroad in 1883. Named for a Menominee Indian term meaning among the rolling hills, the village began with only 3 buildings, including the rail station and a log cabin that served as a boarding house, post office, eatery, and eventually a hotel.
Now I know I've mentioned this before, but logging up here in the North Woods was akin to the gold rush and silver booms that happened in the old western towns, because basically whenever the logging industry came to town, it brought life to these little places. And then when they logged everything off that they could in the area, they'd move on, much like they did with the mining of the gold and silver out west. And then depending on the townspeople's ability to adapt to the loss of the logging industry would determine whether or not the town would survive and live for another day. Wasaki has been able to do so, as you can see.
After the logging boom ended, farming and dairy cows quickly became the primary industry, with immigrant farmers being sold the deforested land on which to farm. Nowadays, the town supports a variety of industries, including some manufacturing and a bit of tourism.
Here's one business that's been around since the early 1900s, the Ruble Funeral Home, which was established in 1918. Not that I know much about the funeral home business, but I imagine it's one that continues to provide numerous opportunities as time goes by. And then just beyond the funeral home, you can see a church up on the hill. I think we're going to head up that way next. Give myself a little bit of a workout going uphill on this bike. I have found for myself anyways that riding an e-bike has really opened up new opportunities. I've always enjoyed cycling. I've been riding a bike since I was, I think I was 7 when I learned to ride my first Schwinn. It was a beautiful looking Schwinn. Dark blue with a white banana seat with little tiny flowers on it. Awesome bike, if I do say so myself. But I digress because I was talking about why I like e-bikes so much now, and that's because getting older, the old knees start giving you trouble, you find you can't ride as far, you can't go up hills as good. Having been able to move into the world of e-bikes has really just opened up my summer to a lot of biking. I've already got over 200 miles on my other bike. I won't say the name because that would be rude, but you know which one I'm talking about. I love that bike. This one, testing it out today and finding that the torque on this thing is just a little bit more than what I'm used to. Hopefully I don't end up wiping her out. Thankfully though, we've made it to our first stop of the historic buildings I wanted to show you. This is St. Augustine Church. From what I understand, it's been around since 1889, and in 1906 they further expanded to build a convent and a school. It's my understanding that some of the buildings aren't original, that perhaps the school may have burned down at some point and then they rebuilt. But take that with a grain of salt. I don't know that for sure, wasn't able to verify that. I just know that St. Augustine Church has been with the community since pretty much the beginning. I noticed when we were riding up the hill that there was some steps going up to a mysterious looking area. I think we should go check it out. What do you think, sightseers? Should we go check out the mysterious set of stairs, stone steps going up the hill? It looks like there might be some playground equipment back there. Obviously, I'm not going to attempt riding that up the stairs because I really don't want to be doing a film shoot from the local hospital. Since we're in Wasaki, I feel fairly confident leaving the e-bike right there for the few moments we'll be up here. Anywhere else, I probably wouldn't do it, but again, we're in small town Wasaki, and generally in small towns you don't need to worry about that thing, especially over here in Wasaki. Well, it looks like I was right. This is a little bit of a playground, more like grassy field with some playground equipment on it, most likely from the old school that I'm assuming is no longer in use today as a Catholic school. Don't know what they're using the buildings for, but you can see they've got a really tall slide like the one that I used to play on back in the day. If it wasn't so ridiculously hot, I would maybe attempt a go down on that thing. But you know how it is when the sun is shining so brightly and the temperature on the thermometer is showing like nearly 80 degrees or 80 plus degrees. These things get super hot. Oh yeah, that baby's sizzling today. Alright, well, I think I've shown you about all there is in this hidden little playground that's just sitting here in Wasaki. Not to mention, it seems the mosquitoes have found me it's time for me to move on and show you the rest of the town. You can see that many of the streets here in Wasaki are marked as ATV routes. That's becoming more and more common up here in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. Seems a lot of people are getting into UTVs and ATV riding. Moving on, you can see the street that we were on is aptly named Church Street because down over there is St. Augustine's, and then up over here is the First United Presbyterian Church, which is also a historic church here in Wasaki. While I don't know for sure if the building itself has been around since 1889, I do know that the congregation has been in Wasaki since 1889. And then just for funsies, I want to point out this house, specifically the tents that are popped up there in their yard. I don't know if any of you used to do this, but back when I was a kid, I had friends that would put up their tents in their backyard, and then we'd have sleepovers there. Saying my friends because my parents, we didn't do any camping. So it was always the friends that did camping that had the tents, and we'd go over there and sleep out in the tent overnight. And it was always just a really fun thing to do in summer, because being that we were out in the tents at night, the parents really had no idea what we were doing unless they got up to check on us, and in most cases they didn't, and so we'd have the run of the neighborhood, running around playing games like Ghost in the Graveyard and Freeze Tag, Kick the Can, Red Rover, things like that. Does anybody else remember doing things like that? If you do, let me know in the comments section below. There may have even been one time when a bunch of us girls decided it would be totally funny to moon cars that were driving by, but I don't know. Those are some stories that maybe are best left in the past and probably shouldn't be talked about in front of a church. That totally reminds me of that time in my life. Well, this is kind of interesting. I took a ride up the hill on the road that's next to the one that brings you up to that secret playground and discovered this. Looks like something used to be here. Not sure what, but whatever it was, they don't want you trespassing on the land that's there. And just as a side note, the snowmobile trail appears to go right through here. And looking at the sign, we can see that Amberg, which is a small town we stopped in on one of our impromptu Sunday afternoon drives on a Tuesday, is only 22 miles from here by trail. Before I get into trouble for being too nosy of a Nelly, I better skidoo on out of here and show you some more interesting points about Wasaki. Oh look, there's Marty, my favorite sightseeing sidekick. I always stop in and see what he's up to. What you doing, Marty?
Staying cool.
Yeah, I bet you are. Parked under the shade. You got the AC running?
Yep.
Nice. As fun as it's been tooling around on the e-bike, I think Marty's gonna do me a solid and pack it up for me, and then I'm gonna go walk around to a few of the sites. He may even give me a ride and let me cool down in the car for a bit. What do you say, Marty?
Sure.
Sound like a plan?
Yep.
I think so. Marty was so nice, he even drove me over to my next stop here on this little tour of Wasaki, the Land of Oz Museum.
One of the largest Oz collections in the entire country. Gary Parrott started collecting thanks to his wife, who gave him a Wizard of Oz collector's plate in 1989. Filled from top to bottom with every kind of Oz-themed item imaginable, the Land of Oz Museum in Wasaki is a must-see. especially for anyone who grew up with L. Frank Baum's creation, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Isn't that totally cool? Some of you might even remember when we took a tour of it so many years ago in the early days of Sightseeing Sally. By the way, the building that you see here was a grocery store back in the 1930s, and I guess was even the American Legion Hall at one point. Now it houses all of Gary's Wizard of Oz memorabilia. And given the fact that a collector doesn't just collect things once, they continue to collect, I'd be willing to bet there's quite a few more things that were added to his collection since we were there last. Now, one thing I think that's totally cool about the layout of Wasaki is that anybody that lives west of Highway 141 is essentially built on a hill overlooking the town, and that gives you the vantage point of seeing all the action going through town. And given that the highway doesn't bypass the town, you can see there is a lot of traffic going through its downtown. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of, that there's a lot of traffic that rolls through this town during the week. I imagine a lot of it is, trucks coming through hauling goods, and then of course people going to and from work. But then on weekends, Fridays especially, there will be a lot of traffic going north through town, and then on Sundays there's always a lot of traffic going south. Now this next stop is one you've seen before, especially if you've been watching lately, because we made a little detour here on our way back home after taking a Sunday afternoon drive on a Tuesday, where we got ice cream from one of the best places to get ice cream in all of Marinette County. As you can see, today is the perfect day to get ice cream, as evidenced by all the people getting ice cream. And then I love that they've got the Wasaki Bowl here. Not that I'm a huge bowler, but it's just really nice to see that there are still communities out here, small towns, that can hold a business like that here in town. Speaking of businesses, did you know that some of Wasaki's earlier businesses included things like a pickling station, blueberry production, a broom factory, a cigar manufacturer, and get this, there was even a curtain hanger extension maker here in town.
Another interesting little-known fact about Wasaki is that Grammy Award-winning jazz pianist and composer Lyle Mays reportedly grew up here.
Who would have thought something like that would have been going on here in the little town of Wasaki? We're coming up on a couple of historic buildings here in town. Right there is a historic home. Unfortunately, I don't have any info on that, but I do know that this building here that now houses Invictus Team Realty was originally known as Hotel Wasaki, and it dates back to 1889. And interestingly enough, it's the only hotel structure that's still standing here in town from back in those days. Ooh, here's something that reminds me of childhood. My mom used to call this mock orange. And it looks like the pollinators really love it. One thing, if you're into thrifting, Wasaki has a couple of thrift stores you can check out. There's the Let There Be Light, clothing, gifts, jewelry, and more. And the We Store, known as a Friendly Town thrift shop. And then for you non-thrifters and home decor enthusiasts, you got Northwoods Traditions, where you can get fresh fudge. And then for those of you looking to snack on that fudge you just bought over at Northwoods Traditions, you've got this little spot right here. A teeny tiny park sandwiched between Sal's and this house. See? Sal's right over there in this building here. Since I'm nosy, And there's a free little library. We're gonna take a little look-see to see if there's any good books to be had in this thing. Well, let's see here. Some kids' books right here. Looks like there might even be some romance novels over there. No, not in anything I feel like I need to take home today. Not like I don't have enough reading material at home that I need to catch up on. What a cute little park sitting here. They even have a spot for the kids to play right over there on the old-fashioned spring-loaded joyride machines made by Playworld Systems in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. How about that? Mr. Turtle here was made in the good old USA. The mural on the side of Sal seems to depict life up here in the North Woods fairly well. Obviously, the fishing that goes on here, the wildlife that you see, deer in cornfields, yeah, that's fairly common. Geese flying above the cornfields or the hayfields later on with your tractor there. Oh, and maybe some wolves, though I have yet to see a wolf up here in northern Wisconsin, and I've been living up in the North Woods, going on 8-9 years, something like that, and have yet to see any sign of a wolf. But then again, I'm not a hunter, so... Oh, look at that. Take a rock, leave a rock. One last thing to check out before we say goodbye to this teeny tiny park, and that is this hitching post. I wonder if this has been here for 100 years or so, or if this was put up in more modern times for those riding their horses into town. For those of you who don't know, we do have Amish living in northern Wisconsin that you see occasionally with their horses and buggies riding through, on the rural roads. Even on the highways, you see them on occasion. One thing with the highway going right through downtown, it is busy and noisy. I imagine it's like that probably all day long. It's kind of a double-edged sword when you think about it, because on the one hand, you want the traffic, you want the people coming through to be able to see what you got on your main streets. Well, on the other hand, when you got all them semis rolling through town all the time, those big industrial trucks coming through, it's just like, I think if I spent a lot of time in the downtown area here on this busy highway, my nerves would be fried. But that's just me. I'm all about the quiet and serenity of being out in the woods or the desert, out in the middle of nowhere, with nobody else around. So for other people, this might be totally their bag. A few more historic buildings I want to point out before we move on, and that is, starting over here, Manor on Main. It used to be known as Murphy Manor, and I guess next door there was a boarding house that they ran, which, as you can see, no longer exists. And then directly across the street in what is now the Big Woods Realty office is what used to be McNeely's livery stable way back in the day, and then in more recent times was a drugstore. And then there's the Chippewa Bar, which I believe has been around a while, but I don't know the history on the building, so I can't say for sure. Something that I didn't see that I remember from years ago, we're talking probably, maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago, is that there used to be here on Main Street an old, antique, vintage / junk store. You know, the type where they've got all kinds of old stuff in there mixed in with whatever else they're selling. And it was in, I think, a 2-story building that, if I wasn't mistaken, probably was once one of the general stores here in town. But walking along here, I don't see it anymore. So unless I trained that up and was really thinking of another town, it's gone. And I have no idea what happened to it. But I'm sure there's somebody out there that recalls the store I'm talking about. So if you know what happened to it, if you know the store I'm talking about, you know what happened to it, let us know in the comment section below. Where's that really cool junk store? This is much better. Go down a block or two off of the crazy busy main street and you end up in a residential neighborhood, and it's so much more peaceful and quiet. You can hear the birds singing, the occasional dog barking, you know, the normal quieter neighborhood sounds. And I just wanted to point out that in all reality, Wasaki, for being such a small town up here, well, technically it's a village, but I call it a town. That's just how we speak here in Wisconsin. Wasaki, as I was saying, has a lot going for it. There's a lot going on. You've got plenty to do, you know, if you like ice cream and bowling and just poking around the old shops. A lot to do here, and that's why Wasaki happens to be one of my absolute favorite places to visit. And why I think it happens to be rather underrated when it comes to the top or best small towns to visit.
Be prepared. Wasaki, with its small town charm, often invokes feelings of nostalgia for those who wander her streets. Coupled with the fact that this small Wisconsin town is in such close proximity to some of Marinette County's most scenic public lands, it's no wonder that those who spend time here fall in love with her.
Until next time, this is Sightseeing Sally.